digital. We're fully web-based now, but WRITER'S CHRONICLE.awpwriter.org is where you can find our latest issue. And back in June, Rebecca Potos, who's a wonderful agent and a wonderful author, moderated a conversation with agents and a couple of authors. So you can go back and see what they had to say on this topic as well. But we're joined today by three literary agents: Danya Kukafka of Trellis Literary Management, Maggie Cooper of Aevitas Creative Management, and Eric Smith of Neighborhood Literary. And I'm going to introduce them formally now so we can get right to the discussion. And I promise you guys I practiced this with my screen reader. Those of you who are meeting me online for the first time, I'm blind and use a screen reader. So I'm slowing this down and we'll see how it goes. I screwed up Ilana Massad's Bachelor Anthology subtitle last time, and I'm still sorry about that. So Maggie Cooper is an agent with Aevitas Creative Management, representing adult fiction and select nonfiction projects with an emphasis on writing by queer and trans writers and work that makes our world weirder, kinder, more joyful, or all three. Since she joined Aevitas in 2018, her authors' projects have been Indie Next Picks, Library Reads Selections, and Lambda Award winners. Based in Boston, Maggie holds a degree in English from Yale University, attended the Clarion Writers Workshop, and earned her MFA in fiction from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where she served as an editor for the Greensboro Review. Maggie is also a writer, and her fiction has appeared in The Rumpus, Ninth Letter, The Best Small Fictions, and elsewhere. Her prose chapbook, The Theme Park of Women's Bodies, was published by Bull City Press in 2024. Danya Kukafka is the author of the best-selling novels Notes on an Execution and Girl in Snow, and works as a literary agent with Trellis Literary Management. Danya's most recent novel, Notes on an Execution, won the 2023 Edgar Award for Best Novel and was chosen as the New York Times Best Overall Crime Novel of the Year. Her debut, Girl in Snow, was released in 2017. It was also a national bestseller, an Indie Next Pick, a BNN Discover Pick, and was a New York Times Editor's Choice, among other notices. Her fiction has been translated into over a dozen languages worldwide. At Trellis, Danya is interested in representing literary fiction with particularly propulsive storylines. She is seeking literary suspense, sophisticated thrillers, book club fiction, speculative fiction, experimental fiction, and upmarket fiction you can read in one gulp. She lives in Seattle. Eric Smith is a literary agent and young adult author from Elizabeth, New Jersey. As an agent, he's the founder of Neighborhood Literary and has worked on New York Times best-selling and award-winning books. In his author life, his recent novels include the also best books for young readers selection, Don't Read the Comments, Inkyard 2020, You Can Go Your Own Way, Inkyard Press 2021, and the anthologies Battle of the Bands, Candlewick 2021, and First Year Orientation, Candlewick 2023, both co-edited with award-winning author Lauren Gibaldi. In 2022, Abrams published Jagged Little Pill, the novel, which was written in collaboration with Alanis Morissette, Academy Award winner Diablo Cody, and Glenn Ballard, and is an adaptation of the Grammy and Tony Award-winning musical. His latest novel, With or Without You, a rom-com about two teens working in rival cheesesteak trucks, published in 2023, and was a Junior Library Guild selection, as well as the Pennsylvania selection in the Library of Congress Great Reads from Great Places program. Thank you three for being here. These agents are donating their time so we can keep this event free and open to non-AWP members as well as AWP members. So if you are tuning in and can't stay for the whole thing, I'll also say this will be up on our YouTube channel in perpetuity, so you can check it out. If you have to go run and catch Wheel of Fortune or something. So I'll start with, let me just ask you guys to talk a little bit about how and maybe why you got into publishing/agenting. And I'll start, I guess I should call on folks. Let's start alphabetically by first name. Danya.
Okay. Well, it's so good to see you, Eric and Maggie. I feel like the three of us have been sort of intertwining and crossing paths for many years as writers and as agents. So it's very cool to have us all together. And That was really cool to hear all the bios read out loud too. Like, wow. Anyway, getting into agenting for me was a very long and winding path. I started right in college. I went to NYU as an intern at Penguin Random House, and then at the Book Group, which was an agency, and then at a small ebook publisher. And right when I graduated from college, I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I did not think that that was actually possible for me. So I decided to pursue publishing at the same time. And I've sort of been just doing both together for since then, like 12 years now. And I started working at Riverhead Books, which is an imprint at Penguin Random House, as an editorial assistant and then an assistant editor. I left there to write full time, which it turned out that I really didn't love for myself. It was like sad and lonely. And I kind of came into agenting that way as someone who knew I wanted to have a career in publishing, but needed a little more flexibility than the structure of the publishing house required. So yeah, that's kind of the short version of it. So I've been doing the writing and publishing thing side by side for many years, and I've been an agent now for almost 5 years.
And that would go alphabetically by first name to Eric, and we'll go in random orders, or you guys can just jump in after this.
Awesome. Sounds good. And like, Danya, as you know, I am a massive fan of your agent. Dana is just
Shout out
incredible.
to Dana Murphy. She's the best.
Oh. Very jealous you get to work with her every day. And yeah, as for me, working with books was sort of firmly my plan when I was in grad school. I've been working as a editor and doing digital media for Philadelphia's tourism board while I was in grad school, while actively trying to find like any entry-level publishing gig I could. As much as I loved writing about museums and cheesesteaks, that wasn't what I wanted for my future, although then I did write a cheesesteak YA novel, so I guess it all comes back anyway. And I couldn't really get a foot in anywhere wanting to be an editor until a publisher here in Philly, Quirk Books, asked me if I could do for them what I'd been doing at my day job, which was building an online presence, working with bloggers, doing digital media, social media. It wasn't really what I wanted to do, but I think a thing you find often with people who get into publishing is that like when you get your foot in the door, like you get in there, you just go. So I was there for 5 years, and there wasn't really a lot of room to move up in editorial, and I kept looking. And then agenting was the surprise route that I didn't think I would ever take. An agency that I'd worked with at Quirk on a couple of their books was hiring an agent, took a shot, applied, and they gave me a shot when I applied. I was at PS Literary for a decade where I got to learn and grow from some really amazing people before I shifted to launching my own agency. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to get books. I wanted to get into books and get into publishing to make my bookshelf and the bookshelves around me like reflect what I think the world actually looks like. You know, I work with a lot of BIPOC authors, a lot of queer authors, a lot of disabled and neurodiverse authors. And if the books aren't reflecting how diverse and inclusive the world in my life is, then I'm failing at my job, and so is publishing. So that was my route in. I wanted to be an editor, ended up being an agent. You know, this career is my silver medal, but I love it. I love it so much.
Agents are the new editors in many ways. And Maggie.
Yeah, well, I'll just echo again, really fun to be here, Danya and Eric, with both of you, fans of your work, both as agents and as writers. And fun too to be having this conversation with, two other people who also are trying to find, ways to make both writing and helping writers have careers part of their lives. For me, I did not start out working in publishing. I was an English major, like so many of us, and I became an English teacher. And so I taught for the first 3 years after college. I went to get an MFA in fiction writing at UNCG in Greensboro, which is how I am connected to JT here. And then during the process of getting my MFA, I discovered that I actually really liked working with grown-up writers, not just, sixth graders. And I got curious about this question of how writers have financially sustainable and creatively satisfying careers. And the more I learned that agents actually are sort of a key part of that process. When I was in college, I don't think I even understood that literary agents existed. But once I had sort of gotten the MFA and I had met some writers who had agents, that started to feel like a really interesting role. Like, how do we connect writers to opportunities? And I think for me, that's a big part of why I love doing this work. We talk a lot about publishing gatekeepers, but I would like to rebrand us as gate openers as well. And I think like that's what I really love about being an agent and hope to do is like open doors to opportunities that writers might not be able to have otherwise. I came to this through working at a literary magazine, working at some small presses, and I still love working with literary magazines and small presses. But, you know, there are certain levers that only the sort of big trade publishers are able to pull, or that they're able to pull much more frequently and much more easily. And I think as an agent, I am sometimes able to help writers like get access to those levers and when they might not otherwise be able to.
Right. Yeah, and I love that you said gate opener, and the three of you are very accessible. And I think a lot of folks think of agents as these demigods of access. And I think you can find you guys on social media, and how, I mean, we'll get into this a little bit more, but I mean, your presence here it should not be a surprise to anyone who follows your agenting careers. You know, and you are very much about trying to help people. But the first question, I guess, and maybe we'll talk about a change that you don't like that you've witnessed in your agenting life. We'll say maybe the last 5 or 10 years. But what's something about publishing that you've seen change for the worse in the last 5 or 10 years?
Ooh, change.
I can start. I can start. I think the structure of the publishing system is really hard on editors. I think they're very, very overworked, and they're more overworked than they ever have been. So many of them are not making a proper living in New York City, and so many of them desperately need assistance and are getting hundreds and hundreds of submissions from agents a month. And it's just, it's untenable for a lot of editors out there. And that is sort of just the corporate structure we live under. And that I think has worsened significantly since I started agenting. Just editor burnout is very intense. We keep losing amazing people, or people keep moving because the system is flawed.
And I'll just run with that and say that I think that, you know, so much of this has to do with like corporate consolidation, and this, like, you know, with all the major publishers being owned by these gigantic companies that are just interested in the bottom line, which is what companies are, you know, designed to do. It's all about cutting costs and increasing profits year over year. And, you know, that often does not sort of facilitate the kinds of good, deep work that make for really good books. And the sad result of that is editor burnout, the fact that editors are much more likely to ghost agents and just never respond to a submission, the fact that it takes everyone much longer to get back to us, and then it takes us much longer to get back to writers. And two, I think that extends across like the other parts of the publishing ecosystem too. So like marketing and publicity, so many more authors are taking on that work themselves, or they're hiring people out of their own pockets to support that, because the publishers, you know, don't have, or think that they don't have the resources to really invest in salaries and staffing to, you know, give people the kinds of, you know, experiences that they need to have for their books to find readers. And I think, you know, all of that, like we'll talk about, you know, how that's not all doom and gloom, but all of that is really a bummer. And I think, you know, it's capitalism and publishing is a business, but I hope that we're not just going to continue down this path.
Yeah. And I mean, you see it in the administrative side of things too, which like, I feel like maybe like people like us are the only ones that get to notice this. Cause, you know, you hear an editor leaves, that makes, you know, that makes Publishers Weekly and Publishers Marketplace. But like the contracts people, I stress out for them all the time, because like not all agents are the same. Like lots of us are nice, some of us are not. And I stress out for my contracts manager friends who like are dealing with really intense negotiations, and maybe it's only them that's dealing with that, and like those people burn out very fast. I see contracts people come and go all the time, and like the problem with people not just in contracts, but in like editorial positions and publicity and marketing. When like people like that are coming and going and leaving and abandoning the industry, you don't just lose like the people there that do the work. You lose this like institutional knowledge that can't be really replaced when someone who's been in the business for 2 decades just is like, I've had it, I'm out. You don't get that back. That's just gone, because so much of publishing is like a almost an apprenticeship-esque sort of gig. And yeah, like when an editor who I've worked on many books with leaves, like I get very upset. Like I mourn that loss, because so much of our job is getting to know people so personally that we know the perfect book for them. And yeah, it's frustrating.
Does just maybe a follow-up to this line of thought, does the current climate, where Maggie mentioned getting ghosted by editors who are just so overworked and their inboxes are overflowing, does this current climate change how many clients you will take on, or the decisions you make when you decide whether or not to take on new clients? Or does that remain steadfast for you guys?
I mean, that's a great question. I think maybe I'm curious what your answers are, but I feel like maybe this might apply to everybody. Like it kind of depends on like the category and like the genre of the book, right? Like there's only so many like kidlit authors I can take on, because there's only so many places I can pitch those books at the same time. And if there aren't a lot of editors at those different places, sometimes I do have to take less, just because I might not be able to send that book around, and that's not going to make anyone happy.
Yeah, I think for the most part, if I love a book, I can't be stopped. It's really, it's, if I love it, I love it. If I don't, I don't. And I have to sort of strategize around that decision after I've made it. But I think one difference for me is that I spent the first few years of my agenting career doing fiction and nonfiction, and lately I'm leaning much, much towards just fiction. I've sort of let the nonfiction side intentionally go, because I feel like I'm really trying to build my relationship with editors who do fiction and solidify those relationships and make sure that I'm doing the best I possibly can for my clients in that space. So, and especially because the landscape is changing so much. So I've stopped taking on a lot of nonfiction just to sort of keep my focus clearer.
It's funny because conversely, I feel like part of my strategy is sort of not to have all of my eggs in one basket as certain categories rise and fall. And so I think came into this industry to work on fiction, but have been doing about half fiction and half nonfiction. And I really love working with nonfiction writers. The challenges there are just different. But, sometimes it is nice to get, it's a little bit easier to get someone to read a 50 or 60 page book proposal than it is to get them to read a 300-page novel.
Yeah. And JT, can I chime in on one more thing that changed?
Yeah, for sure.
One more thing that changed that I hate is like right in the heat of the pandemic, publishing sort of pivoted to this different advance model where like, hey, we're paying out a $30,000 advance. We could split it into like 4 or 5 pieces. And like that makes trying to make a living as a writer like untenable. Like it makes it impossible when you're saying an advance is something that gets paid out a year after your book is published. That's not in advance of anything. Like that's not. Don't we know what words mean? So like that's really frustrating. And also joint accounting seems to try to make a comeback, and I feel like we fight against that nonstop.
I recently saw a new step in the payout ladder that I hadn't seen before, that my colleagues had seen a little bit, but was new to me, which was an extra step between book 1 and book 2, where usually if you do a 2-book deal, you get the signing payments together, but they only give us half of the second book signing payment, and then we have to submit a synopsis and chapters of the second book to get the other half, which is new, and like just an extra payment step. I hadn't seen it before, and I was like, how are we doing this? So yeah, couldn't agree more.
And just to explain a little bit for those people who are not as, familiar with this like advance payout structure, but when you get a book advance, even, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you typically didn't get it all at once, but publishers are now sort of portioning it out into smaller and smaller payments stretched over more and more time, because that means, less risk for them. It means that their sort of balance sheet looks better, but it also means that authors are just like, waiting and waiting and waiting to get sometimes not a very large advance in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, shifting gears slightly, but very much in the same topic of how the landscape of books is changing. I want to talk about social media a little bit and how it has changed. Twitter was so widely used by writers. I met Eric on Twitter. I first connected with you, Maggie, on Twitter. I feel like I got most of my writing connections. I started writing for LitHub from connections I made through all kind, and social media was this vibrant, welcoming space. I mean, there were always assholes, but you just could ignore them and move along and connect with positive people and get information. And Eric, maybe this is good for you to start, because I know part of the founding mission of Neighborhood Literary was a response to the new state of what social media has become. So how has the changes in how have the changes in social media impacted you all as agents or as writers?
Yeah. I mean, I used to use Twitter to occasionally find clients. Like I'd read an essay I loved, and I'd reach out directly on Twitter, and it was great. In some cases, it was like a video game I loved, and I'd go find the writer on Twitter, and like I can credit a lot of my projects and successes to social media pitch events that Beth Fellin used to run, and being able to reach out directly to people. Losing that hurts a lot, right? It's still there. It's not as good. Most people left. The joyful community there is very splintered across different platforms now, like Blue Sky and Threads, and people are trying to go in on Instagram a little bit more. And some people do TikTok. I don't get it. I don't. I never will. And I used to have a pretty massive Twitter following, and now it's kind of useless. It hurts to invest in a platform only to have it nipped away. And I feel like it's changed how I talk to writers about platform. I've never been someone who like pressed social media as the end all be all when it comes to platform, because it's not, like the places that you publish essays and your degree and your job experience and your speaking game, that's all platform stuff. So my advice to writers tends to be like, focus on platform you can own, right? And you can control, and not platforms owned by, a billionaire who's going to ruin it for you overnight. Like focus on what you can hold on to. Sometimes that's a newsletter list, and sometimes that's, pitching yourself out and writing for a bunch of places. Doesn't have to be dancing on TikTok. Don't worry.
Well, I have just started dancing on TikTok, Eric, and I will tell you, it's so embarrassing for me. If anybody out there wants to take a look at my TikTok and make fun of me, go right ahead. I got called out for my millennial pause on TikTok. So I haven't done any dancing videos, but I recently was kind of like, I'm interested in this. I don't do a lot of scrolling on TikTok, but I started making a couple like informative publishing videos that have actually done fairly well. My very cool sister-in-law told me I have like an educational TikTok, not like a self-promotion TikTok. I was like, okay, that is actually really good to know. I don't post all that often. I find it a little scary, and I don't follow the trends there. But I'm with you, Eric, on morning Twitter. I think there was such a good community there. There was such a sense of like everyone, when something in publishing happened, that's where everyone went to talk about it. And we don't have that at all anymore. That said, there was kind of like a sense of cool kids on Twitter that we don't have anymore, and I don't miss that all that much. Personally, there's like a hierarchy on Twitter that I don't personally miss.
I mean, I think it's also like social media in all aspects of life. You sort of imbues you with this like fear of missing out or like not being in the know or whatever. And the extent to which we can divest from that is probably healthy. I mean, I talk to my writers about this. Like, it can be great. It can be so valuable to be on social media to connect with people, to find readers, to like hook up with other writers who are writing in your genre. I have forged a lot of beautiful connections on Twitter back in the day. But, I'm on Instagram now, and there are still some, nice things that come out of that. I have definitely sold books, especially sort of like gifty, like humor books based on social media concepts. And, I think like proud to represent some really amazing people who I think we would probably describe as social media content creators on some level. And in that case, it's just like a delivery mechanism. But I also talk to writers a lot about like, at the end of the day, I would rather you write a really good book than have a million followers on TikTok and write a mediocre book. Like that is ultimately like the thing that really, really matters. And, there is, I think for many of us, an inverse relationship between how much time we spend on social media and how good of a book we're going to write. And I think it's good to sort of, be thoughtful about that and kind of what our priorities are.
Yeah, that's all really good information. And I think time is flying, you all. So I'm gonna sort of cut one question. I don't know if you were going, if just in case you had prepared, but I'm gonna maybe come back to it, but maybe not. And I want to save as much time as possible for the folks watching who have brought their questions. But I want to talk next about when we talk about maybe the political impact on publishing. One of the things that we're often talking about is the effect on writers from marginalized groups or writers who identify as underrepresented. And I'm curious, in light of recent events, in light of recent elections, what advice or what do you tell either current clients or writers you meet at conferences who identify as marginalized? What do you tell them about their future in publishing or writing?
Yeah, I mean that's a hard one, right? Like I'm sorry, Maggie. Were you gonna?
No, you go first.
Okay. I mean, I always, especially with my current clients, I remind them of how important their stories are, and outside of those sort of like soothing, sort of words, like I think it's my job to do the extra level of research and work for those writers, right? Like if I'm pitching one of their projects and it's close to them and their identity, like I have to make sure it's going to the editor and the publishing house who's going to understand, empathize, and push the work in the way it's meant to be, right? A big part of an agent's job is knowing all these things very personally and knowing those specific things that editors and publishers care for and know how to handle is, I mean, that's how I take care of it. I mean, there's also this, I don't know. I wonder how like you guys feel on this too, but like when you're a writer and you're navigating the publishing world, there's sometimes this feeling that you have to give up everything about yourself in order to have a book published. Like every little piece of you like needs to go out there in order to do it. This isn't me saying you need to hide those things in the face of feeling marginalized, but also don't feel like if there's something you are uncomfortable with, like you don't have to put everything out there. Like you don't owe publishing and the capitalist machine like everything about yourself. So just, I don't know. I always feel like I need to bring that up because people ask me all the time when I'm going to write things that are deeply personal to me. And I'm like, probably never. Like, I don't know if it's not your business.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the three of us, our lists have a very high percentage of marginalized writers on them. And so we're really used to talking about these things openly with our clients and really going to bat for them. And part of it for me is knowing when to advocate for my writers for with the publisher and sort of saying to myself, like, I have power here. I am the gate opener in many ways, and I'm going to try to get the best deal I possibly can, the best publication path I possibly can, the best campaign I can for my writers. And for writers who are not yet represented, the thing I do say is like, stay true to yourself, stay true to your story, write the best version of yourself, your identity, your story, whatever it is that you want to say, do it as beautifully as you can, and it will speak to the people it needs to speak to. And I think there is an appetite for freshness. There is an appetite for openness of thought in the publishing industry now, even though the world is dark and scary. I do think people want to read new stories about new lives and new worlds they haven't seen before. Maybe that's a hopeful take. I don't know.
I think we need hopeful takes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the first thing that I thought of in response to this question, that I would say to marginalized writers is we need you, like we need your stories, like however you identify. And I think my role as an agent, as I think Eric and Danya have already said, is to sort of like smooth that path to the extent that I can, to stand beside you or in between you and the people who are not going to get it. I think too, like people often ask me about, queer stories in particular. We're actually doing a panel on this at AWP in Baltimore, plug for the in-person conference in March. But people ask me like, what is the appetite for queer stories in publishing houses now? Is there a chilling effect? And what I tell them is like, there are still a lot of editors who share these identities or, understand how important it is that we see these stories. And I think a lot of those people are feeling galvanized to fight for those books. That doesn't always mean that they can, take out their checkbook and make it happen. But I do feel like, the publishing industry is made up of individuals, and a lot of them really care about these issues and want to make it happen. And so I think like hopefully that will give us the tools to keep showing, publishers that it's profitable, because that's the other thing that they're really interested in. And I have to say, like, even from the time that I came into publishing in like 2017, 2018, like I think we have shown that queer books can be profitable. And that's something that I hope we can, continue to demonstrate. But I mean, at the same time too, I want to create an environment where publishers are, as motivated as possible to publish stories, even when they don't think they're going to be profitable. Because I think that sometimes is like sort of weaponized as a like, oh, well, we tried to publish a trans memoir, or we tried to publish a book about a Black family and it didn't do well, so we can never do it again. Like, that's not an excuse either. And I think like the more that we can all sort of like call that out and name it for what it is, at least the more we can acknowledge the fact that that's not okay.
Yeah, and speaking of what sells or doesn't sell, I mean, obviously publishing is trying to keep the lights on, and I think everybody can empathize with agents wanting to represent work that they think they can sell, and publishing houses wanting to publish work that will keep the lights on. But I'm trying to find a segue here to the question about what is selling right now, what is not selling right now. And to your best estimate, is there something that is a harder sell due to cultural or political climate? Or is there something that, for example, I believe some will say escapist fiction, whatever that might mean, is more popular during times of political unrest? Are there trends that you've noticed, whether it's with the kinds of work you specifically represent or work that you don't represent, that feels like it's a direct response to the world?
I have staked my entire career on my belief that crime and mystery and thriller is evergreen, and it will live on. It will live on through all eras, and I believe that is true. And time again, I'm like, my submissions have proven to me that is easier for me to sell, and it's a good thing. I love it, and I'm really good at it, and it's like kind of my whole jam, because I do think readers always want it. They always want a new version of a mystery to read, and I think that has been centuries of literature have told us that. And it's very fun to be sort of thinking about new ways to make it work while knowing that there's something there that is kind of reliable to me. And shaping my list in the last few years has really been like, okay, how many thrillers and mysteries do I sort of need to offset the more experimental things I'm doing? and it's been really cool to see the genres changing and moving.
Yeah.
Let me just say the word romantasy. I feel like this question is really queuing us up for that. Yeah, romantasy is doing well because, and I think, I mean, I was talking to my sister-in-law last weekend, who is a hardcore romantasy reader. She was like, she said the word escapism. She was like, I don't want to read about the world. Like, she works in a hospital. It's not fun. And she wants to read about people with magical powers having sex and going on adventures, and more power to her. So I do think there's like something to be said for escapism. But I think that can also look like a lot of different things. It doesn't have to look like romantasy. It also, doesn't have to be for every reader and for all time. I think writers often get really sort of preoccupied with the idea of what's selling and the idea of trends. But it's also important to remember that like publishers are already pulling back on acquiring romantasy because they know that not every trend lasts forever. And they already know that the pipeline is full of romantasy from writers who are already successful in that genre. So they're thinking about, okay, well, what is the next thing that people are going to want? And so I think for writers, sure, pay attention to what's selling now, but also like write the book that only you can write that feels like it's not already in the market, because that is the thing that actually like 3 years from now might be the thing that people really need.
Yeah. And for me, I feel like the two things that I'm seeing the most of are editors asking me for horror novels, for adults and for kids. With horror, it's not just there to scare us. I saw a writer talk about this once, and I don't remember who it was. It might have been Claire Bell Ortega, said that like the best horror novels exist to not just frighten us, but to show us how to be brave, right? And like those are the kind of books we also want when there's like political unrest and people are upset. Here's something scary. You're gonna get through this, and I think that's why we're seeing them having an extra boom right now. I would also argue that I feel like the supply of horror is never going to meet the demand, just because I think it's the most difficult thing to write. I would never be able to write a horror novel. I don't know about you guys. I couldn't. It just would not happen. So books that make us want to feel brave, in addition to the escapism stuff, for sure.
Well, I want to get to audience questions after this one final question. And the last question I want to hear from you all, hear responses on is what in writing or publishing is giving you hope right now?
I'll go first with this one because it picks up of, what we were just talking about. But I really think people are reading. I think even compared to when I came into this industry, 8 or 10 years ago, people in the general public are reading fiction and getting really excited about stories. And maybe it is not the most highbrow literary fiction that some people watching this are excited about, but I really do feel like that is great for all books and it's great for publishing. And every time someone reads a novel and remembers that reading is fun and it is a hobby that adults can have, I think that's a great thing.
I'll jump off of that and say audiobooks are making me really hopeful. I think audiobooks are bringing so many more readers to books. And those readers are then picking up physical books. But even if they don't, my take is audio absolutely counts as reading. And audiobooks, watching people who I personally know who are not readers start to devour audiobooks in the last year or so has made me really excited about where that space is going.
Amen to that.
Excited about publishers trying to make new adult a thing again, right? Like they tried like a decade ago and it didn't quite happen, and like we see it do so well in like the self-published spaces. Like it's done amazing over the years in self-published spaces, and now we see publishers launching imprints like dedicated to it right now, and like there's a big audience like between like when you're 18 and fresh out of high school and like going through college and trying to figure out your life till when you're like 25, that like, I don't know, I feel like we are missing like books that are just like specifically for them and that I'm supposed to have come of age, but oh no, I still haven't figured my shit out yet kind of stories. I can't wait to see what they do with it. I really hope it sticks around this time.
It's a good variety of answers. That's a good variety of hope. And let's go to the lightning round. We have a chat. There may or may not be questions already there, but drop your questions there and we'll get to as many as we can. I know some questions require longer, more thoughtful answers. Some questions are very quick answers. So I'm going to let our agents decide what they pluck and what they want to speak to, and they're going to read the questions from the chat and take it from there.
Yeah, it looks like we have one. This is a question that agents get asked all the time, but I'm always interested to hear other agents' answer to it. What makes sample pages stand out to us in a query when you're going through that inbox?
That is a great question.
It's so hard.
I feel like my big one, like, and it might be yours too, is voice. Like immediately, like since I work on a lot of like middle grade and young adult books, like I can tell right away within like those like 10 pages if the voice is going to be right for the category that the writer is trying to write in. I really feel like that's the first thing I zero in on.
Yep. I was going to say exactly the same thing. And it's hard because voice is intangible, right? It's not something you can be like, well, you just do this and you just do that. But it really, to me, you know, I work in really specific literary fiction spaces where I can almost always tell right away if a voice is too commercial for me, or if it's just not the right genre for me, or if the pitch is right, but the voice doesn't match it, like Eric said. It's very immediate for me, and it's also a confidence, a self-assurance, and a tone that I think the opening pages have to have that feel like you know exactly what you are, and let me tell you.
And I'll just say certainly yes to all of that, and I'll add two more things that I think about a lot, which are surprise and specificity. I don't need like a gotcha surprise. Like I don't want something that doesn't make sense to happen in the first couple of pages, but I do feel like there's this like experience that you can probably relate to, you know, when you start reading a book of like a line or like a piece of dialogue or an event that kind of like makes you sit up a little straighter or makes you feel awake. That to me is often like a really good sign that there is something alive in those pages. And then for specificity, I think like often I find that like what sort of like distinguishes to me something that's like, you know, just doing the job from something really great is like that kernel of something that feels really textured, really unique to that particular point of view, really grounding me in that place or that character's experience. And sometimes like those little details are actually the ones that kind of like accumulate to make me say like, yeah, I'm going to read on here.
Totally agree. I see our next question. If a potential client has a book, does the possibility of other books increase your interest in the author?
Ooh. That's a great question. I love these questions because I'm always curious what everyone else is going to say. I would focus on one book at a time in your query letter, right? Like I've definitely run into situations where like someone pitches me a book, it sounds great, and then I get down to the bottom of the query and they have something else that is like absolutely not for me, right? That's a problem for future you, right? Like focus on that first book. Maybe you sign with that agent, maybe you don't, but if you sign with that agent and they sell that first book of yours and the next book isn't right for them, they're your agent. They're going to help you find someone else potentially. Maybe there's someone else at the agency. And if there's not, you go on the hunt again. So don't stress about that second book just yet.
I agree. I often find the concept of multiple books a little distracting from the book that I want to take on. And, you know, I love to talk to my authors about what they want for their future career. You know, are you going to stay in this space? Are you envisioning yourself as this kind of author? You know, what do you want for yourself? That's a big question you like to ask long term, but it doesn't have to be like, oh, I have 3 books waiting for you in the rafters. I feel like that to me actually sort of says like, whoa, slow down, focus on the one, and we want to make it amazing, and I love it and you love it, and let's work on that together for now, and then we'll talk about what comes next.
I totally agree. I think, you know, there are exceptions, but, you know, it's like you don't talk about kids on the first date necessarily. So let's keep it focused on the book that you are most excited about right now and whether we can sell that one book, and then we can kind of like, you know, let the conversation develop from there.
Yes. Although if you're a picture book writer who's tuning in right now, we do like to know you have other books kicking around, but that's a very specific sort of category there.
Okay, I'm a little intimidated by this next question because it has to do with everyone's favorite topic, AI, but I do think it is important to talk about. So, this is a multi-part question. How are we advising our writers on using AI in their writing? That's number one. If so, are you suggesting that they disclose that they are using AI in their writing? And then there's also a number three, but I think we should do number one and two, and then I will ask number three. So, how are we advising writers on using AI in their writing? And if so, should they disclose it?
Oh, I mean, our agency won't represent people that put AI in their writing, so I'm not.
I work in literary fiction, which to me is very much about craft, heart, thought, mind, soul. And if I found out that one of my authors was using AI, I would reconsider working with that person. And I think that's also really specific to my space. I'm not. I think there are other genres that might be more open to it than mine. Yeah, so I would definitely suggest you disclose it if you are using it and find someone who wants to work with that.
And I would just say, like, I tend to agree with Eric and Danya that there is really no place for AI in the writing of fiction. That seems like it kind of defeats the whole purpose. I do feel like there are specific cases where, sure, it makes sense. Like I have seen, I think I think there are like interesting like experimental kind of books that like use AI as an interlocutor. Like, okay, fine, that's a very specific situation where you have a clear reason why you're doing it. I know there are certain like reporting and research tools that use AI that some nonfiction writers find really helpful. I tend to be a little suspicious of those, but I'm not totally against them. And I think the disclosing thing is really important. I was actually just talking about this with some other colleagues earlier today. Lying is not a great way to start your relationship with an agent. Like, even if you think that that's what's going to get you in the door, like, that's not a good basis for a collaborative, long-term professional partnership. So I actually ask in my query form, whether AI has been used in the drafting of the work, and I expect people to be telling me the truth. I know that they might be lying to me, but I certainly hope that they're not.
I was also going to bring this up in what brings you hope question. I didn't want to open the can of worms, but it has been opened, so I'm going to go there. I believe that nobody wants to read a book written by AI. I think this is not the kind of threat that we are worried that it is right now anyway, to like the concept of art with a capital A, right? I think half the joy of reading is watching how another person's brain creates a puzzle for you. And I think half that joy is taken away when you understand that there was no brain behind it. I think half the joy is trying to understand how the author did this, who they are, what they put on the page for you. It's a conversation between a writer and a reader. And I think when AI is used, that conversation becomes moot. And I don't think readers are genuinely interested in it. I don't think people want to buy it. And agents don't want to take it on. Publishers don't want to buy it. Publishers don't want to publish it. And readers don't want to read it. That is my hot, sizzling take. I don't know if you guys disagree.
Sounds like the hot takes. Item 3 in this question is looking at it sort of from the other side. How can writers protect themselves from AI training extracting the value of their work?
I mean, that's part of your agent's job in negotiating with the publisher, right? So like right now many of us battling with our publishing friends to get AI clauses into contracts. I've had a lot of success with it. I know a lot of my peers have as well, because publishers know that's what writers care about. The publishers who aren't sort of playing along, I mean, you can Google and find that out pretty quick.
Yeah, our contractual standards are changing like by the second. I feel like our boilerplate, what's what I'm looking for, clauses with publishers are changing, month by month for what we're adding in, what we're allowed to add in, what we're fighting for our clients. So yeah, I mean, as the author, what you can do is talk to your agent and your publisher about it.
Yeah.
And I would just add too that, like, I think this is the kind of thing that, it's not unlike just like being a person in the world where you get to decide how much sort of mental and emotional energy you expend on it and how like offline you are willing to be in order to protect your work. And I think, if your book is going to be published, like probably like, yeah, it could be pirated by an LLM. And that is something that like you need to sort of be aware of and prepared for. but also like, you know, it is very much our job and like our purpose to try to help you navigate those situations and make sure that whatever recourses are available to you are ones that you're able to take full advantage of. I think it's like a bummer that this is the world that we live in. But, you know, as we have seen from this Anthropic case, that like, you know, pretty much all books that were published, including I'm sure Eric and Danya's books, like were part of that whole situation. And, you know, I think it's also going to require like a lot of sort of like oversight and legislation that goes way above us. And so I think like I always think too, like advocating for these things like on a larger scale is something that writers can and should be doing too. Okay, we have another question, totally changing gears since we only have 9 minutes left here. This is from someone who identifies as a physically/mentally disabled writer, wondering how trad pub, or traditional publishing, will work with/for me. And specifically, they say they're curious about how the money flow works when you're on SSDI given income restrictions. I feel like maybe we're not going to be able to answer this question specifically to this person's exact situation, but I think it feels useful to talk about this question of mentally and physically disabled writers working within the sort of traditional publishing sphere.
I think having an agent who can represent you in the traditional publishing sphere is going to be the key in that scenario. An agent who you feel you can communicate with in a way that makes sense for you and have that your thoughts and feelings communicated through your agent to everyone else in publishing would be really helpful for you. And I know a lot of agents are very open to considering people in this space. So I think having an agent who can really help you navigate that again is going to be key. And in terms of money flow, I actually have no idea. I think advances will work how advances will work regardless of SSDI income restrictions, and that might be a question for an accountant rather than an agent.
Yeah, there's a great organization called Disability in Pub that I would recommend Googling and checking out what they're doing. There might be some answers somewhere there on their website or in their future podcast, but I can't quite be sure.
Yeah, I think the answer is finding the right advocate for yourself and for your work.
And I would just add to like, and I think this is true of all marginalized writers and maybe just all writers in general, is not being afraid to ask for what you need and for what is going to allow you to do the best work. I think sometimes writers are so sort of like intimidated by agents and editors or like so excited to have this opportunity that they're afraid to be like, actually, this doesn't really work for me. And yes, there are things about the publishing system that are hard and that you have to just deal with, but there are also a lot of things that we can change and accommodate. And so being able to communicate that and feeling comfortable enough with your agent to do that, I think is really valuable.
Okay, we have one more question. Are there times of year you shouldn't query? I.e., should we avoid December because of holiday insanity?
I appreciate that holiday insanity is capitalized. That's correct.
It's a real event.
Phenomenon. Yeah. I always tell people that I feel like this is something that people say, like, if you try to optimize the exact right time of year to query or to submit or to whatever, you're left with like 2 days that someone hasn't told you, like, don't do it then, don't do it then, don't do it then. I have to say, I sometimes read more queries over the holidays because I have less other stuff going on. I am going to be closed through the holidays this year because I'm already so backlogged. But if I were open, then you sure query me. I rarely am going to read the query on the day that you send it anyway. So the day that you send it doesn't really matter to me. That's my hot take.
Perfect.
Yeah. Perfect take. I think I actually had a friend ask me this question the other day. They were about to send out a query and they were like, oh no, should I wait until January? I was like, I mean, you can wait until January, but then you'll just be with the rush of other people who waited until January. And also all the agents are going to be sending out their submissions. So, it's just kind of a crapshoot. I don't think there's any time that's good or bad. I think what I would do though, is look at your top list of agents and see who's open to queries for the holiday season. I think like Maggie, I'm closed for the next couple of weeks because I'm just underwater. But I'll open up again in the new year and see how, like, what percentage of agents you want to send to are closed, or maybe do one round before and one round after. And I would say also there's a similar moment in August where everyone's just totally quiet, and that I feel similarly about. Like, you can totally send during that period. You might have a better chance at being read, or you might not. It's, who knows?
Yeah. There's a question here for you, JT. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Let me just add one more thing actually on that point is, let's say you were to send your query out now and you were to get an offer of representation the week before Christmas. I would then, or maybe 2 weeks before Christmas, often we say you should ask for 2 weeks to like consider other offers and give other agents 2 weeks to read. I would say in that situation, maybe you should ask the offering agent, can I give everyone until the end of the first week of January, so that you're not asking people to read over the holidays. And I think if the agent who has offered you representation is a lovely and ethical person you will love working with, they will say, sure, that seems very considerate. Please take your time. So I guess that's the only caveat that I would say to that is, like, if you're going to send out at a time that is near like a major holiday, don't put agents in a situation of having to choose between like spending their Christmas Eve reading your manuscript or not representing you.
Maggie, I love that you added that like ethical and nice thing, because I was going to make a joke and say, like, unless it's me, then sign with me. But oh, JT, someone asked, can writers pitch to agents at the AWP conference?
That is a great question. AWP has what's called the Writer to Agent program, which I would search AWP's website, which is awpwriter.org, for the Writer to Agent program. There was a summer edition for the very first time this year, and it's an application process. But if you are attending the conference, you are eligible. Maggie, you've done that as an agent before, right?
Yeah, and you have too, Danya. Yeah, Trellis and Aevitas are both part of that program. And the way that it works is you submit a sort of a query letter and 5 pages, only 5 pages. And what is special about that program is we don't necessarily, when you query me, I expect your manuscript to be completely done, polished, and ready to go. For writer to agent, you can participate in that process even if your manuscript is still in progress. Ooh. Although it's nice to say that in your query letter so that we know that your manuscript is still in progress. But I've met some really lovely people through that program.
Yeah, I've signed and sold many clients through that program. I think it's so awesome. And every year in that 3 weeks, Maggie and I read the, what is it, like 900 submissions of 5 pages. And, you know, usually I pick 4 or 5 people to meet with. So it's very, you know, it's hit or miss, but those 4 or 5 I find to be extremely promising. So I get really excited.
Yeah. And the answer again is that program exists, but it's something you have to look for in advance of the conference. So now, and for the next month or 2, I think, I don't know the timelines, please don't quote me, but Google Writer to Agent.
And the link is actually in the chat. I have the chat pulled up, and awesome. The beautiful AWP fairies in the background have put that link in there.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, we are at 7:58. Is there a very quick question we want to field?
How about, can we all recommend a book?
Ooh.
We can recommend a book. That would be amazing.
Should a book that we represent or that we don't represent, team? What do you want
to
do?
How about one of each?
One of each. I like that.
I like that.
Okay, well, since this was my idea, I'll go first. And I will start with a gift that everyone should get their literary friends for the holidays, this beautiful little poetry anthology, Poetry is Not a Luxury. If you follow Poetry is Not a Luxury on Instagram, you know that the mysterious curator has impeccable taste in poems. And this is truly the perfect gift for anyone in your life who likes books and pretty words. And then a book that I don't represent, I don't actually have with me, but one of my favorite books of the year that came out in the spring, Mutual Interest by Olivia Wolfgang Smith, an incredible historical novel about a queer throuple in the progressive era New York.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So for me, one that I worked on is Everything But Typical by Margot Weston. It's a middle grade nonfiction title about influential neurodiverse people who have influenced the world. Came out with Bloomsbury a couple months ago. And the one that I don't represent that is probably my favorite book of the year is The Dead and Breakfast by Kat Hillis and Rosie Thor. It's about two vampires who run a bed and breakfast, and the like local politicians who are basically trying to run them out of town. And so funny, and like the puns in it are just perfect. You'll love it, I promise.
I love it. I don't have a copy in my office right now, but I have a client book that published just this last week called With Friends Like These by Elisa Lee. It's a thriller set in New York City, where 5 college roommates 20 years after graduating from Harvard play a harmless game of assassin with water guns that quickly turns deadly when there is $1 million on the line. It's very fun. It's a super fast, really great thriller. Really exciting. It's called With Friends Like These. And a book that I just read that blew my mind, unsurprisingly, I guess, was Shirley Jackson's We've Always Lived in the Castle. I'd never read this, and I've been recommended it for like a bajillion years. And I was like, wait, I get why everyone's obsessed with this. And it was one of those moments where I was like, this is a classic that I should have known for so long. And I can't stop screaming about it. And I sound like an idiot because everyone else has been screaming about it for like hundreds of years, well, like 50 years. So
I also just had this experience, Danya. I read it for Halloween, and I was like, wow, it's so good.
It does hold up. It does hold up. And
it really does.
You all have been fabulous. I cannot thank you enough for being on for the last hour and sharing your wisdom and insight and making publishing more accessible and making books less intimidating to try and find homes for. So you're all very Googleable, so I'm not going to give anybody's website. If you Google Danya Kukafka, Eric Smith, Maggie Cooper, y'all will be the first results. But read their work, check their query times. If they're not open now, they'll be open down the road. And thank you very much. And a reminder that I think we're still on for like 45 seconds after we have signed off, so don't say any swear words or you have to put money in the AWP swear jar.
We'll just have a dog cameo until we time out here.
And thank you everybody for coming. And if you missed any part of this, it'll be on the YouTube channel for free in perpetuity. And have a great rest of your Thursday.